Well, good evening, everyone. I am so filled with emotion to be here tonight. It is just truly amazing to come into a place I've never been before and feel so welcomed and so at home. And of course, it's because I have so many friends here who I've worked with for many years now, and it's so moving to see so many other women like myself who become mothers and who are still continuing to strive for change in the world. I've thought for, about 22 years about what I would say if I had the chance to speak to the world once again. I attended Rio Plus 10 in Johannesburg. I attended Rio Plus 20, which was back in Rio in 2012. And each time people wanted to know, what has changed? What has progressed? What has not progressed? What would you say? And I've realized now that the speech that I would give would not be directed at the highest elected officials of the global governments. In 1992, the largest gathering of heads of state ever was held in Rio de Janeiro to talk about the environment and development. And the declarations and the legally binding agreements that came out of those politicians at that time would be considered radical by today's standards. 20 years later, in Rio 2012, everyone was so disillusioned with the leadership of world governments that no one was surprised that the declarations said nothing. And one of the big differences in who holds the power is in the rise of the corporate agenda within our political offices. Those who have risen to the top positions of power are so beholden to the corporations and to the money that has helped them get to those positions. They can't act out of true free will to lead for humanity. So my speech to the world, if I had the chance, would be to those citizens, to the mothers, to the daughters, to the fathers, to the sons, who have true free will to act, to truly lead for human beings, for humanity. My first thought in speaking to you all is how we are so related. We need to remember that no matter who we are all in this together. All of us share the same air. All of us depend on the same water that cartwheels around this planet and has for thousands of years. And we are all so interconnected to one another by the foods and the products that we consume that came from one another's countries, that came from one another's resources. We are a globalized community. We all are so dependent on the natural life cycles that progress again and again to keep us alive. And now we all face a common challenge. We need to come back into harmony with these life cycles to sustain them. Human beings have become outrageous consumers of energy in everything that we do, in the way that we feed ourselves, the way that we take care of ourselves. It has developed over time, but it has exploded with the invention of the car and with mass production. And trillions upon trillions of dollars, of yen, of pounds have been invested into an infrastructure that makes us dependent on cheap fossil fuels. And today we are paying a price for this unsustainable system that we have developed. And it's not just in the what. It's not just in the what kind of energy that we consume, whether it's fossil fuels or nuclear power. Our problem is also how we consume it, with entitlement, as if we can waste whatever we want. Given the snows that have caused over 1,000 planes to be canceled, from out of Tokyo, given what we have seen in the weather patterns over the last year, I'm not going to talk about the consequences of climate change. I'm not going to go into how the scientific community has an overwhelming consensus on human contribution to climate change. No, we don't need to talk about what the problem is. Now we need to roll up our sleeves and get to work changing our energy paradigm. Well, shouldn't this be the work of our world leaders? In 1992, I was a child, and I thought that if we could just get through to the world leaders, they would change the world. But today, we live in a world where the revenues of corporations are larger than the economies of entire countries. But corporations are not responsible to citizens. They are responsible to shareholders and to profit. At Rio Plus 20, 2 years ago, I realized we have nothing short of a crisis in governance. So, where does that leave us? Is changing light bulbs all that we can do? Of course not. Our human energy for change is far greater. And while our political leadership on sustainability and equity and democracy on the international stage is appalling, on the municipal level, on the grassroots level, it is inspiring. How do we change the world? This is the question that we are all asking. I've been asking it my entire life. And it's the question that is so frustrating because there is no one answer. The answer is always changing. It's a question we will never finish asking and we will never finish answering. But we are starting to build up and accumulate some of the answers. Last year I attended a different kind of conference, a conference called Eco City, focused on the sustainable city. And after attending a few of the 100 or more panels and workshops, I realized that Happyville does exist. And Happyville is what alternative economist from the UK, Andrew Sims, talks about, this imaginary sustainable city, the ultimate sustainable city. It's in Ghent, Belgium, where there are more bikes than cars now. It's in Banco Palmas and the dozens of community banks in Brazil that are supporting local currencies, local economies. It's in the transition network that is building and growing and connecting all over this planet. It's in Bristol in the UK where the mayor takes his entire pay in the Bristol pound, which is a local currency. It's in my home city of Vancouver where all of a sudden the urban food movement is the hippest, most happening movement for young people. It's in Bhutan and the gross national happiness and the conversation that is starting about true wealth. It's in the slow movement and the Namakimono Club and the people that I've met and admire in Japan. And when I look around the room tonight and the familiar faces, people that have been doing the same as I have for years and years and years and decades, I realize here we are building this network, building the movement, making the transition. We're doing it together. This room is filled. This room is packed full of people who are like-minded, who know that something is wrong and want to build something different. Well, I want to tell you that you're part of a movement, part of a community. For the last few years, as I've been speaking about the environment, talking about how we can transform our societies, I always get a question at the end. Someone in the audience asks, "Are you hopeful?" And many of these people who raise their hands are almost despairing. Or some of them are cynical. So I've been thinking a lot about hope. I think hope is our human energy for change. Am I hopeful? Of course I'm hopeful. I think we've got to be fearlessly hopeful. Hope is not naive, far from it. Is the mother of a sick child hopeful? It is such a profoundly human characteristic, hope, this love of life for the future that has carried us through incredibly dark times. Hope is the state of desire for a positive outcome, and it comes under duress. Right now there's a lot of movies out from Hollywood about slavery. Now think about a slave. This is the embodiment of the ultimate human disempowerment. Why did they not just lie down and die? Psychologists say that hope comes into play when a situation is dire, opening us up so we can imagine a way forward. Coming out of a history of slavery, was Martin Luther King hopeful? Of course he was. Hope is our roadmap to something different. A generation later, the United States has a black man as its president. Today we all celebrate the life of Nelson Mandela. 20 years into his 27-year incarceration, was Madiba hopeful? We do not know the future. What is impossible today does not need to be impossible tomorrow. We should never limit our imagining of the future. Now, last thing I want to talk about is something very closely connected to hope. The world of humans is driven by economic forces and profit. But it is also completely driven by an entirely different force. The most powerful force in our human arsenal. And this is the power of love. And I know each and every one of you knows about this most powerful force. In 1992, I was my parents' child. I was 12 years old. In 2014, I'm a mother. I have two little boys, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And now I understand why that audience rose to its feet. Now I understand why people are still so moved when they hear the speech of a child speaking to power. We are reminded of our children. I now understand the depth of love that a parent has for their children. Nothing is more powerful. Today I am a parent and I cannot afford to be discouraged. Our greatest hope, we place our greatest hope in our children. Let us uphold our hopes for the world, for our children. Let us uphold our children. Let us nurture this spirit that we have here, this community that we have here. Because it is this community, it is these relationships, it is this alternative paradigm that we are creating that will carry us through. The human family is a family capable of incredible injustice as well as infinite possibility. We are vast and diverse and complicated. So let us nurture this spirit and our will and our hopes for a new way of being. By coming here, I believe you're proof that the change is happening and that we are the change. And the fact that we are mothers and fathers and children here tonight proves that there is a hope and there is a way forward. So ladies and gentlemen, Cafe Slow, Namakimono Club, Ami, everyone, thank you for having me, and I stand in solidarity and community with you.